What if the man pushing a mop down the hallway held the one skill that could save a billion-dollar empire? What if the woman who spent her life building power finally found peace in the quietest voice in the room? This is the story of a single dad in a janitor's uniform, a panicked billionaire CEO, and the one moment that changed both of their lives, spoken not in English, but in flawless Chinese. Now let's begin. Savannah Hale's voice cracked like thunder across the glass-walled boardroom of Alara Systems, a tech empire she had built from the bones of her 20s. It was supposed to be the most important day of her career, the signing of a $300 million joint venture with a powerful Chinese consortium. But at exactly 9:07 a.m., her phone buzzed with a message that turned her stomach to ice. Your interpreter has tested positive for COVID, unable to attend. No backup, no plan B. And the Chinese delegation was already making polite movements to stand up. In their culture, silence was never empty. It was full of meaning. And right now, that silence meant they were prepared to walk. Someone call legal. No, get marketing. Maybe we can zoom in a translator. Too late. Savannah muttered, her heart slamming against her ribcage. They're offended. We've already lost them. She turned helpless for the first time in years. It was the kind of helpless that didn't belong to billionaires. The kind that strips you bare in front of a room full of executives, assistants, and cameras capturing every second for internal PR. Then came a voice. Not a shout. Not a panic. Just a calm, clear voice from the back of the room. Wo lai ba. Savannah turned toward the voice instinctively. It had come from the hallway. A tall black man in a janitor's uniform stood there, mop bucket at his side, gloves hanging from his belt. His eyes were steady, his Mandarin flawless. Let me handle it, he added in English. The boardroom went completely silent. One of the junior executives scoffed under his breath. Who the hell is this guy? But Mr. Chun, the lead negotiator from Beijing, froze. Then he slowly turned, eyes narrowed, and asked in Mandarin, Ni Shi She, who are you? The janitor stepped forward, respectful, but confident. His tone shifted to the soft, educated cadence of someone who had not just memorized vocabulary, but lived the language. Wo Shi Caleb Brooks. Wo Chengzheng Zai Zhongguo de Dashi Guan Gongzuo. I'm Caleb Brooks. I used to work at the U.S. Embassy in China. There was a beat of stunned silence. Then Mr. Chun smiled an actual smile and said in Chinese, Then let's sit down and start again. Mr. Brooks. The entire room breathed out as Caleb walked past. Savannah nodded to her gently and took a seat next to her at the table. Savannah didn't say a word. She couldn't. She was watching her company being saved by a man she didn't even know worked in her building. 20 minutes later, the deal was back on track. Tea was poured. Polite laughter floated around the table like music, and Caleb Brooks translated every word with grace, nuance, and unshakable calm. When the meeting ended, Mr. Chun stood, shook Savannah's hand, and then turned to Caleb. He clasped his shoulder and said in perfect English, Sometimes power does not come from titles. It comes from knowing when to speak and when to listen. Caleb nodded humbly, then turned to leave, already heading back toward the elevator. Wait, Savannah called after him. Mr. Brooks, he turned, a faint smile playing on his lips. I didn't know we had anyone on staff who spoke Mandarin, much less someone who just saved my company. You don't, he said. I'm not on staff. I'm with CleanPro, night shift janitorial, contracted out. The words hit her like a slap. She was the CEO. She made every hire, oversaw every contract. She prided herself on knowing every corner of her building, and yet she had never seen him, never known his name. You speak Mandarin like a diplomat, she said softly. Who are you really? Caleb hesitated, then gave her a measured look. Just a father, trying to stay close to his daughter. Savannah blinked. I'd like to thank you properly. Lunch, a conversation. He smiled again, this time with more warmth. Maybe someday. Right now, Lily's waiting. And she doesn't do well with delays. He disappeared down the hall, leaving Savannah standing there with a dozen executives pretending not to eavesdrop. She turned to them. Meeting's over. Someone get me a full file on Caleb Brooks. Today. And with that, she walked out, heels clicking against polished tile, but for the first time in years off balance. Not because her company nearly lost $300 million, but because someone invisible just became unforgettable. And something in her heart, something she didn't even realize was asleep, was beginning to stir. The file came in less than 12 hours later. Savannah Hale wasn't used to waiting. Not for contracts, not for dinner reservations, and certainly not for background checks. But something about Caleb Brooks kept replaying in her mind, like a movie she couldn't stop watching. She sat alone in her private office overlooking downtown Austin, the lights of the city flickering like fireflies against glass. Her fingers tapped impatiently on the folder as she read the first few lines. Name Caleb Elijah Brooks, age 36, education Georgetown University, BA in East Asian Languages, military service, U.S. Army Intelligence, Linguistic Division, previous positions, language analyst, Taipei Embassy, attaché, Beijing, consultant for State Department, current employment, janitorial staff, Clean Pro Services, night shift assignment, Elara Systems, HQ, reason for departure from government service, personal hardship. She stopped there, stared. Personal hardship, she murmured. What the hell does that mean? Later that evening, as the Elara offices emptied out, and the night crew trickled in like shadows, Savannah stayed. She knew it wasn't standard protocol for a CEO to loiter in her own lobby. But that night, she didn't care about protocol. She cared about the man who'd walked into her boardroom and changed the trajectory of her company, and maybe something else she hadn't dared name yet. At precisely 8:02 p.m. the elevator chimed. Caleb stepped out, duffel bag over one shoulder, mop bucket in tow. He was dressed the same as the day before, clean pro uniform, worn sneakers, baseball cap pulled low. Savannah stood by the glass display case, featuring Elara's founding patents. When he saw her, he paused mid-step. You stalking the janitor? Now, he asked, the corner of his mouth quirking up. She smiled. I've done worse things in this building. Caleb chuckled. Well then, I guess I'm in elite company. Mind if I walk with you? She asked. He gave a non-committal shrug. It's your building. No, she corrected gently. It's our building now. You saved it, remember? They walked in silence. At first her heels soft against the marble, his steps casual, practiced. He guided the mop along the hallway without looking down, like someone who knew every inch of the place in the dark. How long have you worked here? She asked. Almost 2 years. And in that time you never said a word. No one ever asked, he replied simply. Besides, you learn more listening. Savannah nodded. That's true in business too. But most people still talk too much. He smirked. Especially the ones with corner offices. She laughed, a real genuine laugh she hadn't heard from herself in months. When they reached the end of the west corridor, Caleb stopped. A long, narrow bench sat beneath a window that overlooked the downtown skyline. It was quiet here, almost sacred. This is my break spot, he said. Lily calls it Daddy's sky chair. Savannah's brow furrowed. Lily. My daughter, he said, eyes softening. She's 8. Artistic. Brilliant. Stubborn. Funny in ways she doesn't mean to be. Loves flashcards and hates spaghetti. I work nights so I can spend days with her. Savannah sat slowly, carefully. She felt the corporate mask slip just a little more. Is that why you left the government? She asked. He hesitated, then nodded. My wife died. Complications after Lily was born. I couldn't be everywhere at once. Had to choose. So I chose her. There was no self-pity in his voice. Just truth. The kind that builds mountains out of men. Does she speak Mandarin too? Savannah asked softly. She's learning, he said, with a proud smile. She likes the tones. Calls them music math. Savannah stared out the window, her voice almost a whisper. You're extraordinary, you know that. No, he said. I'm a janitor. I clean floors. I empty bins. I mop up the parts of this world that nobody else wants to touch. She turned to him. You saved a $300 million deal yesterday. He met her gaze. I saved it because I understood the language. Not just the words, but the silence. Power doesn't always come from who speaks loudest, he added. Sometimes it comes from the person who's been quiet the longest. The line hung in the air like scripture. Savannah knew she'd never forget it. They sat there for a while, two people who couldn't have been more different on paper, but whose silences seemed to understand each other without trying. Finally, Caleb stood. I've got bathrooms to scrub. Savannah rose too. You should be running global strategy. He chuckled. I'm already running something more important. And what's that, bedtime stories? He said with a wink. She shook her head, smiling. Caleb Brooks. You are impossible. No, he replied over his shoulder as he walked away. Just underestimated. As Savannah watched him disappear down the hallway, a thought struck her with unexpected clarity. In all her years chasing power, she'd never met anyone with so much of it. And he didn't even wear a tie. Savannah Hale didn't sleep much that night. She tried. God knows she tried. But every time she closed her eyes, all she could see was the image of Caleb Brooks, sitting on that bench, speaking about his daughter, with a softness that made something in her chest ache. In her world, strength had always worn heels, carried a briefcase, and spoke at 85 words per minute. But Caleb, he carried his strength in silence, in small moments, in flashcards. At 6:43 the next morning, Savannah made a decision. She wouldn't just ask about Lily Brooks, she would see her. The library wing at the East Austin Community Center smelled faintly of glue printer ink and vanilla-scented floor polish. It was a quiet space, all soft colors and mismatched chairs filled with children who knew the weight of struggle better than most. Savannah stood just inside the doorway, unnoticed. At the back table, Caleb sat cross-legged on the carpet beside a little girl with thick curls and headphones too big for her head. She was flipping through laminated flashcards, each one hand-drawn, meticulously colored. Schwigwo, Caleb said gently. The girl tapped the picture of a strawberry and replied, water fruit. Very close, he smiled. In Mandarin, strawberries are cow mei. Try again. The girl squinted, whispered, cow mei. Caleb clapped softly, then leaned in and kissed the top of her head. That's my brilliant Lily. Savannah felt the breath catch in her throat. It was the most intimate, extraordinary thing she had seen in years. She waited until the session ended, then approached as Caleb helped Lily gather her things. He spotted her and raised an eyebrow. Miss Hale, this is a surprise. Savannah offered a warm smile. I hope it's not an intrusion. He looked at Lily. You up for meeting someone fancy? Lily peeked around her father's leg, blinked at Savannah, and then pointed to her. You wear perfume, she said. Savannah laughed. Guilty. Strong. Smells like lemon and clean money, Lily added seriously. Caleb burst out laughing, nearly dropping the flashcards. That's surprisingly accurate. Savannah knelt to Lily's eye level. Well, what if I told you I'm here to learn from you today? Lily frowned, considering this. You don't know Mandarin, not a word. Then sit, Lily commanded, patting the spot beside her. We begin. For the next 40 minutes, Savannah sat on the floor beside Lily Brooks, repeating phrases, mixing up tones, getting corrected, and laughing more freely than she had in months. She had closed multi-million-dollar deals on 3 continents, but nothing had ever made her feel as grounded as that moment cross-legged on a carpet repeating, Ni Hien Kong Ming. You are smart, when the lesson ended, and Lily wandered off to reorganize the flashcards alphabetically, her own game. Caleb explained. Savannah leaned back against the bookshelf. She's remarkable, Savannah said quietly. Caleb nodded. She saved me. I thought I was supposed to be saving her, but turns out I was the one being rescued. Savannah turned to him. You really gave up everything for her, didn't you? I didn't give up, he replied. I just shifted focus. The world told me I could either be a father or a man of purpose. But I decided to prove that raising her was my purpose, and everything else. Just noise. Savannah felt something inside her break, or maybe open. You could be working in diplomacy, in strategy. You could be unhappy, he interrupted gently. She looked at him. Really looked at him. There was no regret in his eyes, no longing for the life he left behind. Just clarity. And somehow that was more seductive than any resume she'd ever read. On their way out of the center, they paused at the entrance. The early evening sun lit the sidewalk in amber, and fireflies had begun to flicker in the grass. Lily chased them, giggling, her arms outstretched like wings. Savannah stood beside Caleb in silence, watching. She doesn't like loud places, he said. Hates crowds. But fireflies. She says they whisper instead of shout. That's beautiful, Savannah whispered. He turned to her. You're different than I thought, he said softly. Oh, I thought you were made of marble and numbers. Turns out you've got a heartbeat. She laughed. Don't tell the board. They might replace me with a spreadsheet. They stood like that for a long moment. 2 people from opposite sides of the world, tethered by something invisible, but undeniable. Thank you for today, she said. Thank you, Caleb replied. Lily only opens up when she feels safe. And today, she felt safe with you. As Savannah drove home that night, she rolled the windows down. The wind tangled in her hair. The city lights blurred like fireflies in motion. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like the CEO of anything. She just felt alive. And quietly, unexplainably, seen. Rain had started to fall just after midnight. The kind of soft whispering rain that didn't demand attention, but carried its own quiet message. Savannah Hale stood at the window of her penthouse apartment, watching water thread down the glass like veins. Her bare feet sank into the thick rug, but her mind was far from home. She had not been the same since that afternoon at the community center. It wasn't just Caleb's daughter, though Lily's quiet brilliance had shaken something loose in her. It wasn't even the way Caleb looked at her, not with desire, not with admiration, but with something rarer recognition. He saw her, not as a brand or a billionaire or the woman behind the quarterly reports. He saw the woman who used to sleep in her car between night classes, the woman who lost her mother at 16 and built a career out of raw grit and relentless precision. And for once, she didn't want to run from that version of herself. She wanted to invite it back. The next morning, Savannah arrived at Alara Systems before dawn. No security, no assistant. Just her and a fresh cup of black coffee in her left hand. She walked past her office straight to the boardroom where the Chinese delegation had nearly walked out just a few days earlier. The air still felt charged. That's when she saw it. A USB drive sitting on the corner of the long table. Black. Unlabeled. Slightly scuffed. She turned it over in her fingers, instantly recognizing the initials scratched lightly on one edge. CB Caleb Brooks. He must have left it behind during the negotiation. She almost walked it down to facilities, but stopped. There was something oddly deliberate about it. Caleb didn't seem like the careless type. The man spoke 3 dialects of Mandarin and never once missed a verbal cue. No, if he left this behind, it wasn't an accident. Or maybe it was. But what if it wasn't? Her curiosity, always sharp, now burned. Back in her office, she sat down at her desk, slipped the USB into her encrypted laptop, and opened the root folder. Inside was a single file. Reagan Slade, evidence.zip. Savannah froze. Reagan Slade, her COO, her right hand. The woman who stood beside her for 8 years, through 6 mergers, 2 scandals, and 1 near bankruptcy. Savannah stared at the screen for a long time, her heartbeat slow and hard in her ears. She clicked, entered a temporary password. The folder exploded open into a jungle of subfolders, each dated labeled, cross-referenced. Emails, PDFs, internal documents, audio recordings, dozens of them. She clicked the first. Email. June 14th, 17 p.m. from Reagan Slade to unlisted external domain. Subject, they'll never notice if it's under 3.5% of the quarter's gross. Just adjust the vendor line. The next few minutes were a blur of scrolling, skimming, and steadily mounting nausea. Savannah wasn't just reading about financial manipulation. She was seeing clear evidence of discrimination, employee promotion blocks, whistleblower suppression, entire contracts flagged for review just because the vendor had a last name that sounded too ethnic. It was deliberate, sophisticated, and deeply personal. In one recording, Reagan could be heard mocking a regional director's accent during a private lunch. In another, she joked that people like Caleb don't belong in boardrooms, they belong in boiler rooms. Savannah felt something hot rise in her throat. She swallowed it down. She knew what she had to do. But it wasn't just fury that drove her. It was grief. Grief for the trust she'd given Reagan. Grief for the version of herself who had once said, "I don't care who you are as long as you get the job done." That line now felt like a permission slip for injustice. She forwarded the folder to her private legal counsel with the subject line, "Urgent, whistleblower documentation, Slade review required." Then she stood up, walked into the hallway, and pressed the button for the executive elevator. But instead of going to the top floor, she went down past marketing, past HR, all the way to the sub-basement, where Clean Pro Services had their supply locker. When the elevator opened, the smell of lemon cleaner and cold cement hit her like a memory. She found Caleb near the boiler room swapping out a wet mop head. "Miss Hale," he greeted, not surprised. "You found the drive." She nodded slowly. "Was that your plan?" "No," he said, then paused. "But maybe it was Lily's. She put it in my bag. Said, 'Daddy, you forgot your truth.'" He smiled faintly. "I guess I did." Savannah stepped closer, voice soft. "Why didn't you come to me directly? You weren't ready to hear it." She nodded. It wasn't condescending. It was true. "You were right about Reagan," she said. "And I'm going to take action. Today." Caleb gave a slow nod, his eyes searching hers. "There's more than one way to clean a building," he said. She smiled, bittersweet. "And sometimes the dirtiest corners are in the boardroom," she replied. As she turned to leave, Caleb called after her. "Savannah." She turned. "Thank you for listening. Most people only hear what protects their power. You heard something that might cost you everything." She didn't blink. Some things are worth losing if it means finally seeing clearly. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky had shifted from gray to a hopeful blue. And for the first time in a very long time, Savannah Hale didn't feel like she was managing a company. She felt like she was becoming the kind of woman her mother would have been proud of. The kind of woman who didn't just build empires, she cleaned them too. The boardroom smelled like fear. Not the sharp, immediate kind, born from confrontation, but something slower, older. It hung in the air like stale perfume, the kind that clings to expensive fabric long after its welcome has faded. Savannah Hale sat at the head of the long, gleaming table, her expression calm but unreadable. The screen behind her displayed nothing but a still Elara Systems logo. 12 executives flanked her on both sides, murmuring low caffeinated greetings and speculative guesses about the emergency meeting. Only 2 people in the room knew why they were there. Savannah and Reagan Slade. Reagan arrived 5 minutes late, as always, just enough to establish dominance. Her cream blazer was crisp, her lipstick flawless. She entered like a storm front, silent, polished, dangerous. "Savannah," she said smoothly, taking her seat without looking at anyone else. "Is this a product recall or another M&A panic?" "No," Savannah replied, folding her hands. "It's about integrity." Reagan smirked faintly. "Well, that narrows it down." The other executives laughed, awkward, sycophantic. Savannah didn't. She pressed a button. The screen behind her flickered. A folder opened. Reagan Slade, documentation, curated evidence, 16 audio files, 43 emails, 12 internal memos, 4 vendor discrimination cases. The room went dead silent. The first audio clip played. Reagan's voice unmistakable. "If it's under 3% of the quarterly gross, no one's going to audit it. Move the numbers. No paper trail." A collective shift rippled across the room. Eyes darted, jaws clenched. Clip 2. "He's too dark for the campaign rollout. Put him in back-end support and slap a diversity label on it. Problem solved." Clip 3. "Caleb Brooks? You mean the janitor? Honey, people like that don't belong in boardrooms. They belong under them." Reagan went pale, then flushed crimson. She stood. "Where did you get this?" Savannah's voice was steady. "A whistleblower, who ironically was in the boardroom. You just didn't see him." Reagan turned to the rest of the executives, scrambling. "This is absurd. These are taken out of context. You all know me. This is vendetta, not evidence." Savannah didn't flinch. "We also have internal emails, vendor flagging patterns, and manipulated quarterly reports. Our legal team verified all of it." There was a long silence before Daniel Kessler, CFO, finally cleared his throat. "I've personally seen 3 of those flagged vendors lose contracts without reason. One of them was run by a Bronze Star veteran. The optics alone are catastrophic." "Optics," Reagan snapped. "This is business. We optimize, Daniel." "No," Savannah said sharply. "We exploit. Or we did. And it ends today." Reagan's voice dropped into a hiss. "You're going to throw me under the bus for some mop slinger who got lucky with a few Mandarin phrases." Savannah stood slowly. "No," she said. "I'm standing for the people you walked over to build your staircase. I'm standing for the employees you silenced, the families you damaged, and the version of myself who once believed results were everything." She turned to the room. "I failed you. For not seeing it sooner. For valuing efficiency over ethics. But that stops now." The vote was swift, unanimous. Reagan was stripped of her title, escorted out by HR within the hour, and placed under internal audit and legal investigation. No exit package, no quiet departure. A public reckoning. Back in her office, Savannah sat in silence. The city outside buzzed, as if nothing had changed, but she knew better. The rot had been there for years, hidden beneath reports, margins, strategy decks, and it took a janitor to show her where to look. A knock on the door. "Come in," she said. Caleb stepped inside his uniform, damp from the misty rain outside. He held his cap in his hand. "You did it," he said. "No," she replied. "We did." He gave her a long, quiet look, the kind of look that stripped away all the walls and metrics and titles. Savannah stood, walked toward him. "I owe you." He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." I do, she said softly. Not just for the drive, for the clarity, for Lily, for reminding me who I used to be before I started measuring worth in decimal points. He studied her a moment longer, then said, "You know what? I told Lily last night. I said, some people build towers so tall, they forget how to climb down. But tonight, I watched a woman walk down on her own. And I told her that's the kind of leader the world needs." Savannah's throat tightened. She turned away, blinking hard. "How is she?" she asked. Caleb smiled, still alphabetizing her flashcards. "She's moved on to verbs." There was a pause then. Would she let me visit again? She already asked when. As Caleb turned to leave, Savannah called after him. "Hey, Caleb." He stopped in the doorway. She walked to a desk, reached into the drawer, and handed him a keycard. "What's this?" he asked. "Access. All floors. Anytime." He raised an eyebrow. "Did I get promoted?" Savannah smiled. "You always were, Caleb. The only difference now is we finally noticed. Outside, the clouds began to part. The first rays of sun slid across the city like gold threads unraveling darkness. Inside, Alara Systems, something cleaner than profit was taking root. It started with a man who knew 12 languages, but had mastered the most important one of all, integrity. The air that morning was different. Not just the crispness of fall or the late bloom of jasmine outside the Alara Systems campus. It was something quieter. A stillness the kind that follows a storm, not of thunder, but of truth. Savannah Hale arrived at work before the first executive car pulled into the garage. She didn't head to her office. Instead, she made her way to the far wing of the building, the one where night crews came and went unnoticed, where fluorescent lights buzzed faintly and the air smelled of pine cleaner and quiet labor. She found Caleb in the supply room restocking gloves. He looked up, not surprised to see her. "I figured you'd be at the top floor," he said, standing straight. "I was," she replied. "But I wanted to start the day somewhere honest." He studied her a moment, then nodded toward the hallway. "Walk with me." They moved through the building like two people without urgency, just intention. Savannah's heels echoed softly, while Caleb pushed a quiet utility cart beside her. "I'm stepping down from the day-to-day," Savannah said finally. Caleb didn't answer at first. "I'll stay on as chairwoman, but I'm hiring a new CEO, someone younger, smarter probably, but with a spine. And a heart," Caleb asked. "Non-negotiable," she said. He looked at her, a trace of pride in his eyes. "It's the right call." She exhaled deeply. "I always thought my identity was Alara. The late nights, the contracts, the market caps. But lately, I feel like the company got cleaner the moment I got out of my own way." Caleb smiled. "Sometimes you don't have to lead from the top floor." They turned a corner and stopped at a break room that overlooked the trees below. Savannah leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Why didn't you push harder?" Her voice lowered. "You had the proof about Reagan. You had the knowledge. You could have taken it to the media, or HR, or anywhere. But you waited. You left a USB on a table and walked away." Caleb didn't answer right away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn flashcard. The corners were frayed. On it was a hand-drawn image of a mountain. Beneath it, the Mandarin word for patient. "Because I learned," he said quietly, "that truth only sticks when someone's ready to carry it." He looked at her, eyes steady. "You weren't ready, Savannah. Not until that meeting. Not until Lily." Savannah nodded slowly, her throat tightening. "You're right." She looked away, then back at him. "But you risked everything. Your job, your safety, your peace." Why, he met her eyes again. "Because I believe in quiet revolutions." She sat down on the edge of the window bench. Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "I can't stop thinking about Lily," she said. Caleb's expression softened. She's breathtaking, Savannah continued. I've met thousands of people in my life, geniuses, billionaires, politicians. But your daughter made me feel more human in 15 minutes than most people have in a decade. Caleb looked down. She has that effect. Does she know? Savannah asked. How hard you fight for her? Caleb's jaw tensed slightly. I don't know. I hope one day she will. For now, I just try to make her world feel safe, predictable, and kind. Savannah leaned forward. Let me help. He blinked. With Lily. She nodded. Not just financially. I want to be in her world. If she'll have me. There was a long pause. You're not doing this out of guilt, are you? He asked gently. She smiled. No. I'm doing it because when she looked at me, I didn't feel like Savannah Hale, CEO of Alara Systems. I felt like a person. And I liked that version of me. Caleb was quiet for a moment, then reached into his bag. He pulled out a small, spiral-bound notebook. It was filled with childlike handwriting. She started writing a story last week, he said, handing it to her. About a girl named Saffron who wears power suits and rides a dragon made of numbers. Savannah's laughter escaped her before she could stop it. That's disturbingly accurate. She named the dragon Eli Ray. Caleb added with a grin. Savannah ran her fingers over the cover of the notebook, humbled. You can come by Thursday, Caleb said finally. That's flashcard day. She'll want to teach you adjectives. I'll be there, she promised. As they walked back toward the central corridor, Savannah stopped beside a potted plant near the east entrance. Hidden behind it, barely noticeable, was a small drawing taped to the wall. It was of a woman with dark hair and a cape made of stars, standing beside a little girl holding a glowing lantern. Above them, written in marker, the woman who saw me. The girl who glowed. Savannah stared at it stunned. Caleb followed her gaze and smiled. Lily drew that after you visited. Savannah swallowed hard. She sees the world so much clearer than we do. She sees what's real, he said. Outside, the morning sun filtered through the high windows, illuminating the dust in the air like flecks of gold. Savannah turned to Caleb. You know, for someone who works with cleaning supplies, you sure track a lot of mess into people's lives. He chuckled. That's because sometimes you have to stir the dust to find what's underneath. She looked at him long and slow, then said softly, Thank you for letting me see what was underneath. He nodded. It was always there. You just needed the right lens. They stood like that for a beat too long, then parted ways. One toward the executive wing, the other toward the loading dock and his janitor's cot. But neither of them would be the same. And somewhere down the hall, a girl named Lily was drawing her next story about a quiet man who cleaned buildings. And the woman who finally cleaned her soul. The executive boardroom at Alara Systems had seen its share of million-dollar decisions, power plays, and silent wars fought behind polished smiles. But today, as the leather chairs filled one by one, there was a quiet tension unlike anything before. Savannah Hale stood at the window, her back to the room. She wore no makeup, no heels, just a charcoal gray blouse and black trousers. The woman who once built her image as bulletproof now stood intentionally unarmored. She had called this emergency meeting with one purpose: to redefine the soul of Alara. Daniel Kessler, CFO, leaned over and whispered to HR Director Janine Cross. Any idea what this is about? Janine shook her head. But if Savannah's dressed like that, it's not about quarterly earnings. The door opened again. Caleb Brooks stepped in. Heads turned. The room didn't know where to file him. He didn't wear a tie or hold a title. His name tag still read Clean Pro Services. But he walked in with the quiet authority of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to say. He sat at the far end of the table, and Savannah finally turned to face them all. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice calm. Today's meeting is not about numbers. It's about values. The screen behind her lit up, displaying two simple words: culture audit. She continued, 3 weeks ago I discovered patterns of conduct within this company that were unethical, discriminatory, and potentially criminal. I was complicit not by action, but by inaction. And that ends now. Murmurs rippled across the room. Daniel frowned. Savannah, this is a big claim. What exactly are we talking about? Leadership toxicity, financial manipulation, systemic bias. She let that sink in, and it wasn't isolated to Reagan Slade. A silence fell. Savannah clicked a remote. Screens lit up with evidence emails, redacted financial reports, complaint logs that had mysteriously disappeared from HR records. She let the documents speak for themselves. Janine spoke first, her voice low. These are devastating. They're real, Savannah said, and so is the damage they caused. Head of International Ops Martin Talley cleared his throat. What's your ask here? Internal training, outside audit. Savannah looked around the table. Her next words were deliberate. I'm not asking. I'm doing. Starting today, Alara Systems will undergo a full independent ethics audit. Every department, every level. She turned to Daniel. Our compensation packages will be re-evaluated based on impact, not legacy. To Martin, vendor diversity scoring becomes part of our procurement model. To Janine, we build a whistleblower program that actually protects people. And what if the board pushes back? Daniel asked more cautiously than defiantly. Savannah stepped closer, voice calm but steel-edged. Then I walk, and take half our clients with me. Silence. Then applause. It began softly from Janine, then Martin. Then it spread across the room like a wave of release. But Caleb didn't clap, he simply watched. After the room quieted, Savannah turned to him. Caleb, would you say a few words? He hesitated. I'm not a board member. You're the conscience of this room, she said. That makes you essential. Caleb stood slowly. Most of you didn't see me until 2 weeks ago, he said evenly. But I've seen you. For 2 years. I've emptied your bins, cleaned your windows, wiped the coffee rings from this table. He tapped the edge of the boardroom. I listened, and I saw fear, pressure, pride, sometimes cruelty, but also exhaustion. You've been so busy scaling this tower you forgot to check if the foundation was still sound. He looked around. You don't need more vision. You need sight. To see the invisible. To hear the ones who don't speak the loudest. That's how a company becomes human again. No one moved. No one blinked. Because in that moment, they all knew he was right. After the meeting adjourned, Savannah caught up with Caleb in the hallway. You could have run the whole thing, she said, still a bit breathless. I'd rather be the guy who makes sure the room stays clean, he said with a grin. She tilted her head. Funny. I think you just cleaned their minds. They stood by the large mural in the executive wing, an abstract painting once meant to symbolize innovation. Now it looked more like rebirth. Savannah reached into her folder and pulled out a slim envelope. What's this? Caleb asked. A formal offer, she said. Not just a keycard this time. A role. Senior Director of Community Ethics and Culture. Reports directly to the board. Caleb's eyebrows rose. You serious as a heart attack. He stared at the envelope, then smiled slow and full. I'll accept, he said. On one condition. Savannah lifted an eyebrow. Which is Thursdays off. Lily's speech therapy. She nodded. Done. They walked together toward the elevators. Not CEO and janitor. Not savior and saved. Just two people who had learned to see each other clearly. When the elevator doors opened, Savannah turned to him. You know, she said, a year ago I would have called you a risk, and now... Now, she said with a quiet smile, I'd call you the best investment I ever made. Caleb chuckled as the doors closed. Outside, the clouds were thinning, and Alara Systems, like the people who ran it, was beginning to shine. Savannah Hale used to believe healing came with fanfare, press releases, milestones, major wins. She'd measured recovery in charts and progress reports, in investor smiles and stock jumps. But now, standing in a modest community center on a breezy Thursday afternoon, watching a little girl quietly arrange flashcards by moonlight through the window, she realized something else. Healing came in silence, in routine, in the small, sacred repetitions of love. The therapy room was filled with soft, warm light and even softer voices. Lily sat on a circular rug patterned with animals and Chinese characters. A small speaker played classical piano. She was focused fingers, moving with precision as she sorted her homemade flashcards. Caleb sat beside her legs, folded, relaxed, but alert. His shoes were off socks, mismatched. His attention never strayed from her, but he smiled when Savannah entered the room. "You're late," Lily said without looking up. Savannah grinned. "Traffic." "Next time leave earlier," Lily replied matter-of-factly. "I don't like repeating myself." Caleb laughed low and affectionate. "Told you she's tough." Savannah set her purse down and knelt beside them. "What are we learning today?" Lily handed her 3 flashcards in a row. And Jing, un-jing, quiet. Zhongfu, Chongfu, repetition. Shin-ren, Shin-ren. Trust. Savannah read each one aloud, carefully mimicking the tones. "She chose them," Caleb said softly. "Said they were words for people who come back." Savannah looked at the little girl. "You think I'll come back, Lily?" Lily finally glanced at her eyes clear. "You already did." They spent the next hour going through verbs and adjectives, alternating roles. Caleb watched from his spot by the window as Savannah and Lily sat shoulder to shoulder, drawing their own flashcards with markers and sticky fingers. At one point, Lily reached out and touched Savannah's sleeve. "You smell less like lemon today." Savannah laughed. "I'm wearing less stress." Lily nodded, satisfied. "Keep it that way." After the lesson, they sat on the center's back porch. The autumn air was cool and still. Trees rustled softly overhead, dropping leaves like confetti. Caleb brought out 3 cups of hot cocoa from a thermos. Lily drank hers in tiny sips, then curled up on a blanket nearby with her headphones on, humming to herself. Savannah leaned against the railing arms, folded cup cradled in her palms. "She's incredible," she murmured. "She's everything," Caleb replied. "Some days I still don't believe I get to be her dad." Savannah turned to him. "You didn't just save her. You shaped her." He looked down, embarrassed. "We just survive one day at a time." "No," she said gently. "You teach her how to thrive. You do it without noise, without applause, without asking for anything." He smiled. "You make it sound heroic." "It is," she said. There was a long, comfortable silence. Then Caleb spoke again, his tone quieter. "You know, I used to think I'd never fall in love again." Savannah's heart skipped. "I thought maybe that part of me died with Lily's mom. Grief can do that. It doesn't just steal people, it steals parts of you." He looked at her now. "But lately, I've been thinking, maybe some parts weren't dead, just buried, waiting." Savannah held his gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. And now Caleb reached over, gently took her hand. "Now I think maybe I'm starting to remember who I was." Before the silence, her hand tightened around his. "And maybe," she said, "you're not the only one remembering." They sat like that as the sky deepened into lavender. Lily, still curled on the blanket, whispered song lyrics to herself. A low wind passed through the trees like a lullaby. Savannah thought of all the noise that used to fill her days, board meetings, plane engines ringing phones. And now here she was, perfectly still, more alive than she'd been in a decade. As the sun dipped behind the hills, Caleb broke the silence. She wants to start a program. Savannah blinked. Who, Lily? She told me last week. Said she wants other kids like her to learn languages too. Said it helps her line up her brain when words have shapes. Savannah's lips parted. That's beautiful. She wants to call it Lily's Voice. Savannah placed her free hand on his arm. We'll fund it. We'll build it. I'll make sure it's a place where kids like her feel heard. Caleb looked at her overwhelmed. You would do that? She nodded. For her. For you. And because the world desperately needs more people who speak in quiet things, they gathered their things as dusk settled fully. Lily woke with a yawn and declared she would only leave if Caleb carried her. I'm not a suitcase, she said. But I'm tired. So you carry. He scooped her up easily. She wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder. Savannah watched them walk toward the car, the porch light casting long shadows behind them. She didn't know what tomorrow held, didn't know what title she would wear next, didn't know how this quiet chapter would unfold. But she knew one thing with perfect clarity. She was finally living a life worth whispering about. The lights above the stage were gentle, but the anticipation in the room buzzed like high voltage. Rows of chairs filled the grand auditorium of the Global Ethics and Innovation Summit in Seattle, where industry leaders, educators, and social changemakers had gathered for an event that once would have felt like Savannah Hale's natural habitat. But tonight, she sat in the audience, quiet, proud, a guest, not a keynote. And the man taking the stage in a navy blue jacket and open collar, worn not for effect, but comfort, was Caleb Brooks. He didn't stride like a CEO, he didn't carry notes, he walked with the steady humility of someone who knew the truth, didn't need to be dramatized. As he approached the podium, a spotlight swept over him. Caleb squinted slightly, but smiled with the kind of warmth that made even the back row feel like the front. Savannah's heart beat louder than the applause. Thank you. Caleb began, voice calm and clear. I don't usually stand in rooms like this. Most days I'm more comfortable in hallways or classrooms or bedtime stories. A light ripple of laughter. He continued. My name is Caleb Brooks. I used to mop floors for a living. Before that, I translated intelligence reports in Beijing and Taipei. Before that, I was a college kid who thought knowing 5 languages would make me invincible. It didn't. A pause. But learning how to listen, really listen, did. He looked out at the sea of faces. I'm here today, not because of what I know. I'm here because someone gave me a chance to be seen. Because a little girl taught me that language isn't just what we say. It's how we make people feel safe. It's what we repeat day after day until it sticks. Truth, love, kindness. Savannah sat still, breath caught somewhere in her chest. This was not a speech about innovation. It was a sermon about presence. Caleb went on. My daughter Lily is 8 years old. She's autistic. She doesn't always like loud places or sudden change. But she loves languages. Mandarin, French, Spanish, even American Sign Language. She once told me, words are the way I build bridges when the world feels like an ocean. There was a quiet murmur of admiration across the auditorium. I spent years believing I had to climb back up the ladder I fell off when my wife died, that if I wasn't rising, I was failing. But Lily showed me a different kind of success. One measured in flashcards, in eye contact, and trust. He paused again. Today I'm proud to announce that with the support of Alara Systems and Chairwoman Savannah Hale, we are launching Lily's Voice, a free access program to help children with neurodiverse needs learn languages, build confidence, and connect across differences. Applause erupted. Savannah clapped eyes, stinging with tears she didn't hide. Lily seated beside her in her small navy dress, and pink, noise-cancelling headphones clapped too, though slightly offbeat. When the clapping subsided, Caleb looked down for a moment, then back up. I used to believe I didn't belong in rooms like this, but then I remembered. Rooms are just walls and chairs. Belonging is when someone looks at you and says, "Stay." He let the silence sit. And someone did that for me. She didn't do it with fanfare. She did it by listening, by asking, by showing up, week after week, flashcard after flashcard. He looked across the auditorium and unmistakably straight at Savannah. This woman taught me that strength isn't just in the people who speak the loudest, it's in those who are willing to change the most. She reminded me that leadership isn't about being the first to speak, it's about being the last to give up on someone. Savannah couldn't breathe, not because the moment overwhelmed her, but because it healed her. Fully, publicly, permanently. When Caleb stepped away from the podium, the crowd rose to their feet. A standing ovation surged through the hall like a wave, but Caleb didn't bask in it. He walked off stage with humility and headed straight down the aisle toward two people, his daughter, and the woman who had changed both their lives. He knelt beside Lily first. "You did amazing," he whispered. She nodded seriously. "You talked too slow, but people liked it." He smiled, kissed her forehead. Then he stood turning to Savannah. Their eyes met, 2 years of unspoken things, now layered with understanding respect, and something more tender. Savannah took his hand and said, "You didn't just give a speech, Caleb. You gave people a map back to their own humanity." He leaned in, "And you gave me the courage to draw it." As the crowd slowly filtered into the reception area, cameras flashing and conversations buzzing, the three of them lingered behind. Lily clutched a tiny figurine she had brought with her, a dragon made of paper clips and string. "It's for you," she told Savannah, placing it gently in her hands, "to remind you to fly." Savannah choked on a soft laugh. "I think I forgot how." Lily tilted her head. "You didn't forget. You just needed new wings." Caleb looked at them both. "I think we're all learning how to fly again." Savannah smiled. Together. They walked out of the auditorium, not ahead of each other, not behind, but side by side. And for the first time in her life, Savannah Hale didn't feel like a woman chasing power. She felt like a woman who had found peace in flashcards and second chances, in love that whispered instead of shouted. It started with a cup of coffee. Every Thursday morning, like clockwork, Savannah Hale left a tall black coffee, 2 creams, no sugar, on the bench outside Caleb's office at Alara. She never stayed, never knocked, just placed it gently on the wooden armrest before walking away. By the time Caleb arrived for his early morning rounds, it was always still warm. At first he thought it was a one-time gesture, a thank you, a leftover kindness from Seattle. But it kept coming. Week after week, same bench, same cup, same quiet ritual. And then one morning, as he reached for the cup, he found something else taped to the lid. A yellow sticky note with 5 words written in her looping, confident script. "You still make it better." Caleb didn't reply. He didn't need to. Because that night he walked her to her car again, just like the first time she ever noticed him. It was dusk, the golden hour hanging soft and low over Alara's glass exterior. Most employees had gone home, but Savannah remained, as she often did, tying up loose ends with her usual precision and calm. She was locking her office when she heard his voice behind her. "Miss Hale," he said with exaggerated formality. She turned, amused. "Mr. Brooks? I heard you've been leaving mysterious caffeinated offerings." She played coy. "Might have been someone else. I hear the interns are quite generous these days." He smiled. "Well, whoever it is. They seem to know exactly how I take it. They stood in the hallway, the late light catching the curve of her cheek and the depth in his eyes. Silence stretched, comfortable and full. Then gently she asked, "Walk me out." He nodded. Always. They walked slowly through the lower lobby, footsteps echoing against polished tile. No suits, no audiences. Just the woman who once ran a billion-dollar empire and the man who used to clean its floors. Outdoors, the air was warm with early spring. A breeze rustled the leaves overhead as they strolled toward the back parking lot. Lights flickered on along the path, casting long shadows on the pavement. Savannah spoke first. "I think about the girl I used to be," she said. "The one who thought falling in love was a liability." Caleb looked at her, listening. "I was 18 when I watched my mom die of a stroke in a waiting room because our insurance wouldn't approve the ER. After that, I told myself I would never depend on anyone. That success would be my shield. Love felt dangerous. Soft." He didn't interrupt. She continued. "But then I met a man who speaks softly and carries truth like a second language. And suddenly, soft doesn't feel like weakness anymore. It feels like breath." Caleb slowed his steps, voice barely above the wind. "You know what Lily told me after Seattle. She said, 'Miss Savannah doesn't wear her cape anymore, but I still see her fly.'" Savannah stopped walking. Her voice trembled. "That child sees everything, doesn't she?" Caleb nodded. "She sees what matters." They reached her car, sleek, silver, spotless, a symbol of everything Savannah had once chased. But tonight, she didn't open the door. Instead, she turned to him. "What do we do now?" she asked. Caleb took a step closer. "We do Thursdays," he said. "Flashcards, cocoa, long walks, quiet nights." She smiled. "That doesn't sound very ambitious." He chuckled. "No, but it sounds honest." She looked up at him. Really looked. "Do you know what scares me most?" she whispered. He shook his head. "That I could lose this," she said. "Not the company, not the title. This. You. Her. The chance to have something real." Caleb took her hands in his, warm and steady. "You won't," he said. "Not because we won't face hard things. We will. But because we've both already learned how to start over." He brushed a thumb over her knuckles. "We don't need to fall in love like fireworks. We can grow into it like sunrise, one quiet morning at a time." Savannah blinked back a tear, then laughed. "That's painfully poetic." "I had help," he said. "Lily wrote it on a napkin. I stole it." They both laughed. And then, slowly, gently, without drama or doubt, Caleb leaned forward and kissed her. Not the kind of kiss that claimed or questioned, just one that confirmed. They stood like that for a long while, two people who had unbuilt the walls of their lives brick by brick, until what remained was not ruins, but truth. A truth that could be held, shared, trusted. As Savannah finally got into her car, she looked back at him through the window. "Same time next week?" she asked. "Only if you bring the coffee," he said. She grinned. "Always." And as she drove away, Caleb stood under the lamplight, hands in his pockets, heart wide open. Not waiting. Just ready. The ribbon fluttered in the wind like a living thing. Bright blue, wide as a child's smile, it stretched across the new glass doors of the Lily's Voice Center for Language and Connection, a building that stood not as a monument to corporate charity, but as a sanctuary for children who once had nowhere to be heard. Inside, dozens of guests mingled in the sun-filled atrium, teachers, parents, journalists, non-profit leaders, and families from every part of the city. Children laughed and chased one another between learning pods painted in vibrant colors, each room named after a different word, in Mandarin, French, Swahili, or ASL. Savannah Hale stood near the window, her fingers brushing the edge of a ribbon-cutting speech she hadn't yet decided whether to give. For once, the woman who'd built boardrooms from scratch didn't know if words were enough. Not today. Not for this nice crowd, Caleb said behind her. She turned, smiling. He wore a soft grey shirt and a blazer that Lily had picked out complete with a crooked sunflower pin on the lapel. She said, "Yellow is a trust color," he explained. Savannah grinned. "She's not wrong." Caleb looked around, eyes misting. It's exactly how she imagined it. Savannah touched his arm. "It's because of you." "No," he replied, voice gentle. "It's because someone believed in a janitor and a little girl with too many flashcards." Across the room, Lily stood beside a colorful banner that read, "Words are how we build bridges." She wore a purple dress, mismatched socks, and a paper crown that said, "Founder." Beside her stood her new speech therapist, and behind her, half a dozen kids, holding their own flashcards, proudly showing them to curious guests. Caleb watched his daughter for a long moment before saying, "You know what the hardest part of grief is?" Savannah looked at him, softening. "It's not the loss," he said. "It's the fear that nothing good will grow in its place, that you'll just carry emptiness around forever." He paused. But today this emotion to the walls around them, the kids, the colors, the warmth. This is proof that something beautiful can grow where something once broke. Savannah felt the truth of it like a heartbeat under her skin. A small bell chimed, calling everyone's attention to the stage. Janine Cross, now Chief Ethics Officer at Alara, took the mic and introduced the founders of Lily's Voice. Caleb walked up first, Lily at his side, her little hand held tightly in his. Savannah followed. The applause was soft and respectful. This wasn't a place for fanfare. It was a place for meaning. Caleb stepped up to the microphone, looked around, then crouched down to let Lily speak first. She cleared her throat dramatically. "My name is Lily Brooks. I like words. I like dragons. I like people who listen." The crowd chuckled gently. "I made this place so other kids can feel less scared and more brave." More applause. She looked at her dad. "Now you talk." Caleb rose slowly and faced the crowd. "I'm not a public speaker," he began, earning a few warm smiles. "But I know what it's like to feel invisible, to be in a room where everyone talks over you, to feel like what you carry, your grief, your difference, your voice is too much for the world." He looked at Lily, then at Savannah. "And I also know what it's like to be seen, to be invited in, to be told you belong, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. This place is about more than languages. It's about learning the one language that doesn't need words, the language of the heart." He paused. "And today, I want to thank the woman who reminded me how to speak it." He turned to Savannah. "Savannah Hale, you didn't just build this place. You let yourself be changed by it. That takes courage. And that courage gave my daughter a voice, and gave me a future I never dared hope for." The crowd rose to their feet in a slow, heartfelt standing ovation. Savannah blinked back tears, then stepped forward. She didn't read from her notes. She didn't need to. "Years ago I believed leadership meant control, winning, always knowing the answer." She smiled. "Then a little girl handed me a flashcard that said, 'Trust,' and a man showed me what strength looks like when it's quiet." She turned toward Lily and knelt. "You taught me that being strong doesn't mean being loud. It means being true. And I promise we'll keep building this bridge with your words in mind." Lily nodded seriously. "Good. Because I already made flashcards for verbs." After the ceremony, guests mingled with staff, touring classrooms and testing interactive screens. In one room, a child with selective mutism used a picture board to tell her mother she loved her for the first time. In another, a boy with Down syndrome taught a staff member how to sign his name in ASL. Outside, the sun broke fully through the clouds, casting golden light across the small rooftop garden built for quiet moments and breathing space. Savannah and Caleb stood there together, watching children play. You know, Savannah said, I spent half my life trying to earn everything. Power, praise, control. And then this happened. And for the first time, I feel like I've been given something I didn't earn. Caleb looked at her. You gave yourself to this. That's harder than earning. She turned to face him fully. So what now, Mr. Brooks? He smiled, taking her hand in his. Now we live the life we never thought we deserved, he said. One quiet miracle at a time. As they stood in the soft wind, the rooftop bell gently chimed again. Children below laughed, flashcards flapped in the breeze, and Lily, standing by the window, raised her hand and waved. Savannah waved back, heart full. And in that moment, she knew the empire she built might one day fade. The name on the buildings might change. But this language of the heart would echo forever. Before you go, we'd love to know. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, because your presence here means more than you know. If this story touched your heart, and you'd like to hear more moments of kindness, hope, and quiet courage, please consider subscribing to our channel. Each week we share real soul-stirring tales made just for you. Thank you for spending your precious time with us. Until next time, take care, stay kind, and keep believing in quiet miracles.